the Netziv in the Hamek Dover talks about the Meseres that Sefer Bereshis is called Sefer HaYeshorim, the book of the just. And amongst the reasons that he says that is that Avraham Avinu had to subdue his indignation at the behavior of the people of Sodom, and instead to petition on their behalf, to daven for them. He took the decision, Avram, that there would be more kvod shemayim if they would be chayzer b'tshuva, if they would find some kind of a rationale that these people of Sodom, instead of being destroyed, would yet be rescued for kvod Hashem. One of the stunning anomalies of the parsha of Torah is that the same parsha, we have Avram being asked to sacrifice his son. This son, Yitzchak, has been born, as is described, Chazal and the Psukim teach us, Chazal interpreting, understanding the Psukim, that it was miraculous, the birth of Yitzchak, Avram, and so way beyond the years that they should have been able to produce progeny, to proliferate, to propagate. And this very son, who was born miraculously, and the Rebbeinu Shalom has promised him, as it were, Rebbeinu Shalom Kavayochel promised him that Ki b'Yitzchak yichol chazar, that Yitzchak will be the beginning of your progeny, and from him will come out this great nation, Klal Yisrael, that are destined to bring the Dvar Hashem to the world and Tikkun Olam. And yet, Avram, when he's told to sacrifice this son, Sukkim described that it's a test, but there's no resistance, there's no petitioning, there's no request to alter the commandment. So amazing irony that on behalf of Sodom he petitions, on behalf of the tzaddik, where there's a built-in contradiction that how can Yitzchak, who has not yet had any children, how can he become the beginning of the Jewish people who is going to be sacrificed? The number one is that the Netziv also asks a technical question, is that if he's davening on behalf of the people of Sodom, in fact, Tefillah has a certain seder, there's a structure to davening, there's a structure to prayer. The structure to prayer requires first introducing the dialogue with Shevach, with praise of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Once that is done, then you've put into perspective, as we talked about Rosh Hashanah, you've put it in perspective with whom you're speaking. You're speaking to the Rebbeinu Shalom. And until such time as you've been Masada, you have put it in that structure, organized it in that relationship, then you haven't earned the right for the tefillah. compares it to when Hannah was davening and her lips were moving and she wasn't, her voice wasn't heard. And again, over there, the Netziv explains it that she was in the middle of davening and had gotten to a certain point for the petitioning. We're being introduced in the middle. And Avram, in the Seder of the Tefillah, is also, we're coming in the middle in Sodom. There's a Medrash Pliya, which discusses this problem. And the Medrash says that Eov and Avram both, in fact, seem to be critiquing the intended providence, the providence that had already befallen Eov. Eov was punished for it, and Avram was rewarded for it. What's the difference, says the Medrash Pliya, is that Avram said it ripe, and Eov said it was unripe. What does that mean, says the Netziv? The Medrash can be understood to mean ripeness means that it's reached the point of maturation, it's reached the point in its development that it is now the right time to take this fruit. Unripe means paga. It hasn't reached that point yet. Eov does not introduce his questioning, his expressions of pain and anguish with shevach, with praise. And therefore, it isn't inserted at a place that it is the ripe moment for this to be presented. Avram did it that way. Avram did it the right way. He presented it and inserted it in the right place. And similar to this thesis is the Chazal that Gemara and Chulin, that Rava says that in the schus that Avram Avinu said that Ani ofer ve'efer, he is soil and ashes, that Klal Yisrael was zeicher, were privileged, merited, getting the two mitzvahs of the offer of the Seita and the Efer of the Bora Duma. Two mitzvahs. Discussion, the Meforshim, why dafka these two mitzvahs, that we'll come back to that in a moment. But there is there for us yet another question, is that at the end of the sequence of the Akedah, Rashi brings that Avram asks the Rebbeinu Shalom, Achshov Medrash, Achshov Afosh Sichosi. Now I want to understand what transpired here. It was a built-in contradiction. Now here Avram is the one, Parshas Lech Lecho, the beginning, the Medrash Rabbah brings that Avram came to recognition of a Kadosh Baruch Hu through his reason, inductively studying creation, seeing the order, the symmetry, the beauty, the consistency of it all. It was Ra Bira Doleket. Miyad hates it all of a Balabira. He saw a bira, a magnificent palace, and this palace was well illuminated. The light, the heat were contained. That can be destructive. We've mentioned in the past that there are a number of shotim in Doleket. The leket can mean that it was on fire, it was burning. There are some Meforshim that learn that this magnificent, beautiful Bira is being destroyed, is being burnt by the Rishoyim. Fire can be destructive or productive. If it's contained and well designed, the palace, and the fire is in its right place, it's productive. Avram came to this recognition through his reason. Now he's being asked to buy in to a massive intellectual contradiction, rational paradox that Yitzchak has not produced children. How can he begin the Jewish people? And Avram is the one who railed against human sacrifice, and he's going to be asked now to sacrifice his son. And yet he doesn't hesitate, unlike the situation by Sodom, where he immediately swings into action. And here, he, on the behavioral level, what does Avram answer? According to Rashi, he's bringing that medrash, is that the Rebbeinu Shalom says to Avram that the Rebbeinu Shalom was lo hifalti asichosi, he didn't profane his language. There never was an inherent contradiction. I only said, ha'alehu, take him up and bind him. I did not say sacrifice him. The Brisker Rav talks about this question. If so, then why did Avram go ahead with the sacrifice? If he was only told to bind, then how can he take it the next step? So the Briskov says that once something has attained to the level of being a korban ola, it has that now halachic valence of being a korban ola, a sacrifice that is completely consumed on the mizbeach, on the altar, an ola. Then its internal halachic dynamic requires taking it to its climax to v'shachteu, to sacrifice it, once it's bound. Possibly, there's another. There might yet be another interpretation. The other interpretation is that this is a chidush. No such thing as human sacrifice on an altar in the Torah. Sacrifice of a human being on an altar. This is a chiddush. This is unique. This tzivui from the Rebbeinu Shalom to take Yitzchak. Perhaps we're not going to learn out a binyanav, a mametzinu. We're not going to use the midos, the hermeneutic principles, to extrapolate from this another din, because this is unique. It's unto itself. We have another principle. Ein bo ela chidusho. Sometimes the chidush only has it's only relevant here. So there seems to be a duality here. There's a built-in ambivalence that Avram has to work out from the moment he's commanded. Medrash also says that the Satan appeared to Avram while he is organizing the going to the sacrifice, to going to Har Moriah. He's on his way there, organizing what he needs. The Satan appears to him and says, initially you're told that Yitzchak is going to be the beginning of your progeny, then you're told to sacrifice him, later you're going to be told you're a murderer. The Satan is testing him further. But According to Rabbi Avram ben Arambam, when Yitzchak asks, Yitzchak questions. Here we have the twigs for the fire. We have the yesh. We're all organized. Everything we need. Where's the seh? Ayeh seh. Where's the lamb for the sacrifice? And Avram answers, the Rebbeinu Shalom, Elokim yira lo yaseh. The Rebbeinu Shalom, he knows where the seh is. According to Rabbi Avram ben Arambam, Avram was saying it could be that the reconciliation of this patent contradiction will be that there will be a seh, a substitution. That's a possibility. If that is supposed to be the reconciliation, then to take Yitzchak, the next step, V'shochteu, would be needless, i.e. murder. Not supposed to take him. You're only supposed to be V'haleu. But if it's only V'haleu, what's the test? Unpleasant. But it's not a test like V'shochteu. So Avram is housing emotionally in his mind and his thoughts this patent ambiguity, this patent contradiction. And he sees both sides of the coin, the two possibilities. On the behavioral level, he is continuing as possibly, the reason he doesn't challenge here, not challenge in terms of challenging HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Avram doesn't do, a tzaddik doesn't do that, but express the inner turmoil of the contradiction. How can I reconcile this? Challenging himself and how he can reconcile it. He doesn't question the Rebbeinu Shalom. And so possibly he's functioning on two plateaus simultaneously. The behavioral level, he is going ahead. Maybe the reason here he doesn't initially ask, Ravam was a lamdan. Why didn't he make the diuk? V'haleo means only v'haleo, as subsequently he's told by the Rebbeinu Shalom with that medrash that Rashi brings after the Akedah. So Avram is functioning on two levels. One level is the level of the behavioral level. Maybe he holds himself suspect that deep down in his heart of hearts, he would rather not sacrifice his son, this son that he was so miraculously. So therefore, he doesn't question. Maybe v'haleo means only for the ola. He could have made that diuk. Avram was a lamdan. But on the conceptual level, he understands that there is such a possibility, and that's what Avram ben Arambam is saying, in fact, is meant by he understood that as a possibility that may be that substitution, which would then be the reconciliation of what seemed to be this patent contradiction. Avram takes it to its conclusion, and that wouldn't be a contradiction to the fact that he wanted to make a nick in the neck of Yitzchak. He just wanted to demonstrate to the Rebbeinu Shalom that to the Malach who is interceding now, he wanted to demonstrate that he was prepared to go through all the way, and that he understands that everything, even his love for Yitzchak has to be brought to the Mizbeach theoretically. But the Rebbeinu Shalom, in fact, doesn't want the human sacrifice. But Avram was tested theoretically. Chazal are machadish here that it's treated as if Yitzchak was sacrificed. And the Ephah, the ashes are tzova, they are collected, and they form a mound of ashes by the Mizbeach. They're there. It's as if though Yitzchak continued and went on to begin the Jewish people, the willingness, the preparedness, and Yitzchak was an adult that was participating, he understood it, that point that Rav Avram ben Rambam says that they were going Yachtov, he understood, mashma from Rashi like that as well, that this was the case. Perhaps that's also being alluded to in the offer ve'efa, that efa, that since Avram was petitioning on behalf of Sodom, he would be zeicha to the having of a son whose nominal efa would be at the Mizbeach, and that would be building into Klal Yisrael's koach for eternity, the capacity for Mesiras Nefesh. So by Sodom, Avram was removed, objective. It was a pristine petition on behalf of quote Shemayim. There wasn't any subjective interest. On the contrary, he was revolted by the behavior of the people in Sodom. And yet he understood that that's what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants from him. Why is he being told? He's being told because the Rebbeinu Shalom is inviting him to daven, petition on their behalf, that he should be the advocate for rescuing whatever remnant and possibility that could be garnered of some degree of justification. Off of Efa, Reb Meir Simcha says he uses it to connect to the Gemara in Yevomas that says when a person davens, he should hold, his heart should be connected to Shemayim and his eyes down to the earth. Eyes down to the earth. Reb Meir Simcha understood that man is taken from Ophir, he's taken from the soil, from the dust of the earth, and he's rooted in a physical existence, inescapably so it seems. And yet, the Jew whose eyes are down to the earth, realizing where his source is, yet the ashes that Jews have been honed and cleansed in the fire of Sinai. The fire of Sinai, perhaps the ashes of Yitzchak were a preliminary to give them that capacity, but Am Yisrael are brought to a level of cleansing that they reach a level of being angelic in the moment at Sinai. Falls, failure, the egel, but there's a moment there of cleansing that remains embedded in the Jewish soul. Ben Yoyoda says that the difference between ani and anochi is that ani would be either offer or efa ani, a focus on the body or on the transcendence of the soul that has become cleansed at Sinai by the fire, the Aish that was permeated the mountain. Anochi means the combination of both. Its body and soul are now being brought to the fore. So Klal Yisrael have then a capacity, they've been cleansed, and they transcend. They're Ofer ve'efer. And as Ofer ve'efer, they have two unique mitzvahs. Why these mitzvahs? Why not other mitzvahs? Two unique mitzvahs, says Rabbi Simcha, that the offer of the Soita, the Efer of Paraduma, that are unique to Klal Yisrael. The Bnei Noach don't have these mitzvahs. These mitzvahs are the cleansing, the paraduma from tuma, from the state of defilement. The non-Jew doesn't have that tuma. Since the Jew has a greater potential and capacity for transcendent sanctity, therefore, the not using of it allows for the vacuum being filled by tuma, by defilement. The Seder is again a miraculous procedure in the Beis Mikdash that she's going to, if she turns out not to be in fact an adulteress, then she's going to conceive. That it becomes, she went through this procedure because she did position herself in a manner to be suspect. That's a failure. That's harchet. Kine vestire. She was warned, cautioned not to be together with this man with whom she was suspect. She transgressed that. But in fact, she was not an adulteress. And because she was an adulteress, now having had the cleansing, there's going to be a miraculous conclusion here that she will conceive as a result of that, taking the soil of the Beis Mikdash and the Shem Hashem, and with a miracle. So Avram and Yitzchak are symbolic, translated into the human dimensions of the chapters of Klal Yisrael's unique, incomparable history. It begins with an Avram and a Sorah producing a child that is clearly a miracle for this child to be born. And then they are embedding into the kaiches, the energies, the spiritual dimensions that are now absorbed into the material, physical being of the Jew from generation to generation, the potential to either be transcendent and use the miraculous dimensions of Jewish survival. Like Rabbi Yaakov Emden says in his Siddur, that the nisim of Jewish survival in Golus after Bayis Sheni outdistance the Nisim of Mitzrayim in how improbable they seem to be. And Chazal say it is that this one lamb among 70 wolves, and it continues to be again and again in history. So Ofer ve'Efer are the miraculous cleansing and preparation for Klal Yisrael's unique role in history, to be a light, to be an illumination in history, in our darkness, in Golus. Again, we frequently come back to this thesis that it's not that we want less Tikkun Olam, but this is the way to get there. Klal Yisrael's uniqueness. And how do we know this is so? We know it's so because built in to creation from the outset, there was this promise that our history would not go the way of all nations. It's going to be different. It's going to be so peculiar as to make it more reasonable to posit our claim than the alternative claims, is that they were destined from the get-go to have a unique history, Klal Yisrael. Avram, Sarah, the Imois were Akores, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, 3 of the 4. It had to be miraculous because these people are going to have to travel a miraculous interacting with the natural order of the universe in order to elevate it, to pick it up as individuals in their personal lives and as in fact in the history of the national destiny of Klal Yisrael. The Ofer ve'Efer are miraculous, unique mitzvahs, and they're indigenous to Klal Yisrael's mentality, psychology, spirituality. They are unique. They're specific because this nation is going to have this special destiny. And so Avram and Yitzchak take this nisoyon, take this test, and it will now be the forerunner for Klal Yisrael throughout history, our capacity to transcend what seemed to be the most impossible situations. Does that mean that every individual at any particular time will have that rescue? Lav dafka. That each individual family, each individual person has his role in his contribution to Klal Yisrael. But Klal Yisrael as Klal Yisrael will surmount, survive, and continue. And in fact, that today, our marching orders with so much more anti-Semitism in the world, so much more resentment of the Jew and his mission surfacing again, really such a short time after. How long ago was Kristallnacht? The other night we celebrated 80 plus years ago. How long ago were the crematoriums? Hashem Yiten, that Klal Yisrael should plug back in to the moment at Sinai, which we revisit every time we open up the Chumash, Mishnayos, the Daf Gemara, and we are reconnecting with the essential transcendence of our people, and that's the key to our survival beyond any other kind of formula. Do we need formulas that are natural? Of course, but that's our koach. Shem Yitain, that we should see a triumph, a transcendence over the problems that are being presented to the world today, to Klal Yisrael today, and we should see Yeshuas Urefuas for Klal Yisrael as the medium of bringing it to the world. Hatzlocha ubrocha.